Welcome to Big Hearted Indie, where we empower men in Indianapolis to forge deep connections and impactful lives through authentic friendships and service. Join us as we explore personal growth, community leadership, and the transformative power of living out our faith in action. The podcast is produced by Citizen 7, and it is hosted by Greg Enas, Don Palmer, and I am Chris Spangle. Our guests today are Brian Schutt and Seth Morales. And Greg, it's not that Don's not handsome, but we have, I think, an upgrade in the looks department with Fred Yeakey here filling in for Don. But we miss Don dearly. Don is not available to podcast with us today, but introduce Fred briefly, and then let's talk to Brian and Seth. And you knew their dads. You actually went to church with their dads.
That's right. Thanks, Chris. And it is a joy to have Seth and Brian here and my brother, Fred. Fred and I go way back. I think Neff introduced us. And so Fred and I have been partners in crime through Citizen 7 with our heart for Jesus, helping raise up young kids with education that positions them for flourishing in life, especially those kids that are on the margins. And so Fred has been working with Providence Cristo Rey High School for a number of years, has a strong background. But if I can just say one thing, I actually met Fred when we stood up the Oaks Academy.
That's right.
And Fred was with the St. Vincent's and the Babe Center running that. And lo and behold, over a decade later, 15 years later, we reconnect. So it's beautiful. And I'll let Seth and Brian introduce themselves, but all these guys and myself go way back. And so it's a special joy to have everyone here.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's an honor to stand in here and be on this couch with these two phenomenal individuals. To co-host with Greg and not to have Don here is just an honor. I'm going to try my best to be him. Don has a certain cadence that he talks. I remember meeting Don once and I was talking fast and he just slowed me down like a cowboy wrangling a bull. And, but I'm honored to be here. And these two gentlemen are great and can't wait kind of to learn a little bit more about yourself. Why don't you both just kind of open up, tell us briefly about who you are, why you are, and why Indianapolis is home.
Yeah, so Seth Morales, born and raised here in Indianapolis back in 1979.
Ooh,
yeah,
70s.
So I'm going way back. Had the fortunate opportunity of being, when I was born, I was put in the crib right next to Brian. Like a month later, he was born. So we're about a month and a half apart in age, and pretty cool to see him and I grow up here in this area. But born and raised, didn't leave the city, stayed in Indianapolis, went to Lawrence Central High School, then Butler, Purdue University, came back here after I was done with college, and jumped into the family business pretty much right off the bat. I had a job with a company called Rico just right out of school, but been with the business for the last 20 years. And I've had a number of different roles at Morales Group. Morales Group is a recruiting and staffing company, and just have a real heart for serving and putting people to work. And, we've scaled that business up over the last several years and worn a lot of different hats. And on the professional side, that's been great. Personally, married with 3 kids. I've got a 10, 8, and 2-year-old, or a 1.5-year-old. She's going on 2. So it's been fun, just doing life, building the family, building the business, and just being here in the Indian city of Indianapolis. So that'd be kind of my quick story.
Wonderful story. Thanks.
Well, similar to Seth, Indy, as Seth said, a month and a half after him in 1979, and mirrors his story quite a bit. So grew up on the Northeast side, went to Lawrence Central, went to Purdue. I like to take credit for recruiting Seth to Purdue after that short stint at Butler. And as a consequence of my recruitment efforts, I like to take credit for the Rose Bowl as well. Can't take credit for the current Purdue team, but our buddy Neff's working on that. So yeah, after college, I would say I became an accidental entrepreneur. I'd had a short career in sales and marketing. And to be brief on that, just learned that I was a generalist, but didn't know what I was sort of built to do in terms of entrepreneurship, and sort of necessity became the mother of invention in 2009. And a good friend from Purdue and I started a heating and cooling business called HomeSense, and then went on to start a co-working space called Refinery 46, and continue to fill my days juggling different entrepreneurial ventures and advisory work and nonprofit board work. So yeah, and Seth and I, we've kind of, there's not a lot of memories from childhood that don't involve Seth. So hopefully we can explore some of that foundation and just kind of share how friendship can be catalytic.
Yeah, so we are live. If you are watching live, you can join heartbeat.chat at citizen7indy.com, and you can find the link for this every fourth Monday of the month at noon. You can ask questions live, so please leave those in the chat. Dave Neff has joined the chat.
Let's go now.
We're hoping that Dave and Addison and Pete and Madison all ask some questions. We really talk a lot about male friendship, and you're our first set of friends whose dads were friends. Greg was also friends with them and sent a photo of your dads. So how did that shape your friendships? Like, what did that look like when you were kids that led to the rhythms that you have now?
That's a great question. I mean, it's one of those, like, we don't know any differently, I'd say. I mean, they were together, we were together. They helped start a church together. And that's how Greg got connected with Tom and my dad, Don Schutt. And then, yeah, we just, as I said, memories were always involved with you guys. So, I would, it's one of those, like, not strategic, just sort of happened that way. And then just sort of continued to unravel as time went along.
Yeah.
If you can add to that.
I would also add just, faith and golf were the two kind of common grounds, and those carry on, throughout your life. And, I think our dad's playing at Old Oakland for many years, and they still do to this day. Your dad's in his early 80s.
Yep.
My dad's in his early 70s, and they're still hacking it up out there. They're both pretty good golfers, and they're both men of faith and have led some pretty cool careers, different pathways with their professional lives. But I think those have kind of, sports and faith have kind of, early on with Brian and I, we both played a lot of sports together, and faith has always kind of become, a centerpiece for us. And then we applied it with business. And so now it's kind of business and faith.
Well, I think they modeled a continuity of relationship, as Seth was pointing to there. The names of their friends are names we've heard for 45 years. And to sort of have that modeling of consistent long-term relationship is something that, again, it wasn't forced on us, but I think it was sort of in the water. And I'm sure that's something that we inherited from them.
What kind of shenanigans did you guys do as young boys that you actually hid from your parents as long as possible?
Let's get to the real podcast. Let's go. Let's go.
Oh, there's a lot. There's some we can't talk about online.
I would say, like, we were pretty muted as far as shenanigans go. It wasn't to say we weren't doing them, but I think maybe middle school time we would sneak out and not even do anything worthwhile, but it
Sneak
was
out of the house.
Yeah. So we,
Parents are asleep.
they're asleep. We sneak out. I just remember the one time, I think it was you and me and Marcus Bowling.
Yeah.
And so we're out. And again, it's not like we weren't like committing any vandalism or anything. We were walking around playing basketball or something innocuous, and we get back to the house trying to be really, really quiet. We look up, and Seth's mom is looking through the back door. It was just like, oh man, we're in so much trouble right now.
Yeah.
She was pretty kind though. I don't know. Can you think of any?
I think about BB guns and fireworks and ding dong ditching and just kind of just playing around in the neighborhood.
Yep.
You know how that goes. Just, I think there were a lot of just parties that we're at, high school to college. There were some funny memories there, probably a little bit more off color there with some of the fraternity parties that we had. But it was a good time. We got into definitely a lot of fun. I would say that Brian kept me in line. We were both pretty good kids, so we never really got into any serious trouble, but we always kind of were on the edge.
Well, Seth, I think, this is where kind of the athletics come into play. It was always a humbling experience being Seth's best friend growing up, and it probably raised my game. But to like, I mean, I could probably count on one hand the number of one-on-one basketball games that I beat Seth in over the course of decades of playing these games.
Times, man.
I would just have to stick to the outside shot, and I couldn't drive on him. But just to say, like, it was always a humbling experience to, when you don't know any different, when your buddy's just faster than you. And then, so as time went along, I'm like, oh, like he's faster than everybody. So I don't feel that bad, but I think that kept us on the rails as well. Like you actually playing and me trying to play on the teams. Just thankfully not too many shenanigans that we can't talk about here, but plenty of those stories. And I mean, maybe in terms of like a useful point, something that I thought about as my kids get older is we had space to play, and like we were out of the house and we were creating and doing and like imagining, digging forts into the side of hills. Like that's the stuff that I think was some foundational sort of the raw material that ended up being sort of entrepreneurial and sort of impacts our ventures today.
It's beautiful. Outside of golf, where did your different athletic endeavors take you?
I mean, for me,
I'll leave it to him since he can respond to that.
Okay, well, I want to hear about yours too, bro. Yeah. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, I think early on basketball was kind of my sport, and then I got into football later in high school. And I had some success and ended up, playing college football, playing at Purdue, and being a 3-year starter at wide receiver, and being a part of a great Big Ten championship team and Rose Bowl run. That was the main driver of my sports background, but I knew I was fast, and I knew I was pretty competitive, and I could jump, and I had good hand-eye coordination. I could dribble the basketball. I also really kind of catch the ball pretty well. So that played well for me as a young high schooler, being around Brian. We used to play all these different games where you had a ball, you were throwing it up on the roof, you were playing basketball, you had the Nerf bucket like in the house. Like we were constantly playing ball together. And I think those early years of just kind of hooping it up and just having fun together, I think that just continued on for me, and it didn't stop until, my senior year of college. So that was a fun run for me.
That's beautiful. Do you want to talk about your World Series career?
My athletic career took me to journalism because it stopped pretty quickly. So I was
kickball stories.
I was just a sports reporter for the high school paper, and no, it was always sort of a foundation of our relationship. But yeah, I was reporting or in the stands more than anything.
Well, I can say and I'll turn it back over to Fred, but like you, Brian, I have followed the Morales athletic prowess because I remember playing golf with Tom, at Old Oakland. Dude, that guy's a monster. I couldn't even putt, relative, let alone drive like that. And I will say, the first time I did 360 trick skiing on a short board was with your dad in Joe Fuller's boat on Geist. And I tore my rotator cuff. And I was out for 20 years. I finally had Frank Wilson do surgery on it. Literally do that. So I have followed both of the Schutt and Morales parentage and do it and going forward. But Fred, I'll turn it over to you for some more zinger
real
questions.
Quickly, Brian, what high school did you go to?
Lawrence Central.
So both of you guys are Bearcats.
Bears.
Look at me. Okay,
right.
Okay, so Lawrence Central, you guys went to school together too.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So there's a quote. Stephen Covey says every relationship moves at the speed of trust, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's a level of trust here.
Yep.
Explain to us how this relationship has maintained, and how has it benefited you all as you all have professional journeys? Sometimes as you grow, not a lot of people remain childhood friends as you grow into adult and family, but how has this helped strengthen your journeys now?
I think one thing that comes to my mind, Brian is a very intentional friend. And like our buddy Dave Neff, he makes time for people. He's very intentional about showing up when you have big events, and he's good at gathering people together and just being seen and known and making you, feel seen and known. And that's, I think it's been really important. We've had moments where, we've just from John Strange, elementary school to, Lawrence Central to Purdue to, still today, we've just been, I think, intentional about getting together and, now you're helping us out. You're consulting with the business. That's kind of cool. Didn't see that happening today, but there's different ways that we've kind of leveraged each other's strengths. And I think that's, the power of networking. We've built a pretty good network together. There's folks like you and Greg and Dave and all sorts of people that have kind of woven through kind of our front two doors.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that come to my mind. I don't know. What would you add?
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to the original question in some ways, in that we saw with our parents, people that were relationally engaged and continuous relationships and engaged in community in meaningful ways as well. So because I don't know that it was anything strategic. I don't think it was this deeply like ongoing. Maybe it was a micro reflections, but we were interested in the same things. We just had similar preferences, and that's sort of chicken or the egg. But
yeah,
I don't know that relationship was never really like difficult or effort intensive. So it was just to your point, Fred, like the trust was always there. And as we were sort of co-navigating what reality looks like as you grow up, I mean, in some ways, Seth's a more sort of significant relationship than my own brothers in terms of like how, again, navigating alongside somebody who's, sharing different experiences, but similar times. And again, it wasn't this like, oh, let's, create like an EOS and let's get together and go through some agenda, but it was just the natural sharing and like connecting over time. And again, I think it's both in like, helps shapes how you look at things, but it helped raise the bar as well. Just that kind of Napoleon Hill, like
absolutely,
you're the average of your 5 closest friends reality. I think we just always sort of kept raising the bar for one another, both of like kind of what was expected, but also what was possible.
What have you affirmed in Seth? And Seth, what have you affirmed in Brian that's unique to the other that you may really appreciate, that really stands out there? Then I have a follow-up to that.
Good question. I think the few thoughts that come to my mind when I think about Brian, first off, he can synthesize really well, so he can distill like what you're saying and kind of boil it down into some succinct points. And sometimes if I'm riffing on something, I'm upset about something, I need help trying to figure out, maybe generational change of business from one owner to another with my dad and I, helping me navigate that, or navigating family business. He's pretty good at listening, seeing the big picture. And we also have kind of that context. So he's really good at knowing the context, distilling down what's going on, and then kind of making it kind of clear for you to think about. That's one thing. I think Brian's just been a very consistent guy. He has a high motor. He's an Enneagram 7, so he's always looking for like the new fun thing. So you can invite Brian to pretty much anything and he'll show up. He's just one of those guys that wants to be around people. And so I've loved that about him. He's always at the game. He's always at the party. He was always, doing something nonprofit or board wise, like he was involved. And so that kind of, I think, aligned well with kind of what I wanted to do. So those are two things that I think about, like affirming like who he was and what he brought to our relationship. That was important.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Similarly, I mean, I think it goes to kind of the high bar that I was talking about. I mean, Seth is, and I would say, inherited and cultivated, one of the hardest working guys you'll ever meet. So, success tends to like follow effort. And I think he's been, a sort of practitioner of that since we were kids. It wasn't just sort of genetics that allowed him to have success on the field. It was busting his butt, working hard, pushing past competitors. So I saw that. That's something that I've always admired, and I've seen that translate into the working world as well. I mean, just a really organized and disciplined process of hard work and execution. And again, like kind of luck is where hard work meets opportunity, and I think he has cultivated his own sense of luck and opportunity with that. So that's something that I've always admired about him and his family. And I shared this at your grandpa's funeral. Just we used to go work on the weekends with Seth's abuelo, which I called him abuelo because I didn't know it meant grandpa. I just thought that was his name. Mm-hmm. And so Saturday mornings we used to go mow grass all around town. And he was in his 60s and 70s, and he was just like a workhorse. We're over there like breathing heavy, like, it's like 9 a.m. We've been out for 90 minutes and we're just tired. And abuelo's just like knocking out lawns left and right. And so I think he comes from a tradition of guys and men and women that work hard and prioritize family. That's something that Seth has certainly inherited and cultivated.
As a follow-up, how has your friendship affected your why? And with that, you've received a lot of love from each other, but from your families, your parents, your grandparents. So, and the love of Jesus. And I see that demonstrated not only together as brothers and friends, but also for the city.
Yeah.
And so how has your friendship affected your why, both individually and collectively now moving forward into the future here in Indianapolis?
I'm going to let you go with that one first.
Well, I think that's a hard one to sort of distill down. I think, in terms of a why or sort of a motivating reason for existence, I don't necessarily look at it as a sort of concrete target to be reverse engineered towards. And I don't want to go so deeply theological on this, but I think too often as believers, there's a risk to simply transposing cultural best practices onto our faith. And so I think too often when we sort of put a why out there as sort of a target and then reverse engineer our plan to get there, we stifle the creative work of the Holy Spirit. And so
that's good. I like that.
I think there is a healthy holding loosely of whys. And so for me, that's where this is a little bit of, what do they call it in Congress? Filibustering here to give Seth some time. But so for me, why is an emergent thing as much as it is a sort of a target to reach. Part of that is I think we're shaped through relationships. So to the question specifically, I think who we spend our time with, who we're telling our stories to, who we're living our stories with is sort of catalytic in that process of clarifying the why. To the extent that we can have that clarity. So it goes back to the earlier response to some ways that locking arms with, walking alongside somebody who is taking their faith seriously, taking the relationships in their lives seriously, has a way of, the iron sharpening iron reality. And so whether or not he's sort of speaking directly into what it is I'm doing or not, but I mean, even like what he referenced, I think sort of a practical sort of outflow of the relationship. Year and a half ago, I say like, I've been encouraged to sort of go down this path of doing some advisory work. And so he's just like, we got some projects, you can come along. And so just giving that sort of first yes has really been helpful to get momentum going on that emergent part of my career. So again, a little bit evasive on the specific why, but I think he's been certainly a component of the ongoing clarification and integration of what I believe and what I do.
Maybe I can ask something, and Seth, I'm going to kind of put this for you. We kind of hinted towards this with the why. Walk us through how your faith has been an instrumental part of what you're doing in the professional sense and how it's guiding you we kind of talked a little bit about the great things you do in the community, but
Yep.
talk about that thread of faith and how that has motivated you and inspired you to do what you do now.
I think it's a good question when I think about the why and our faith and how it intertwines with what we're doing today professionally. I think about our business, and our why is building better futures one story at a time. And so it's all about lifting others up. And, we just got back a couple of days ago from building homes in Mexico. And I did that with my father and my two sons, our team. We had a staff of 35 go down. And that's kind of coming back to our purpose of why we do what we do. And that's just kind of woven through how we play the game at Morales Group and how we kind of live out our lives personally. And Brian does the same way. I think he's constantly trying to build better futures one story at a time, whether it's through HomeSense or Refinery 46. And so, or our networks, our board work, that's been really important. I also think Brian and I have this like unique being on the edge of the inside where we're not always
that word.
Yeah. We're not always insiders. I think, we're able to overlap and, with different circles of influence, we're able to kind of move in and out of different groups and really kind of try to be a bridge or a light and kind of shine. And that's one of our core values at Morales Group is be a light. And so you can be a light in a lot of different ways from a faith standpoint. You can be a light just helping somebody out, just kind of having wisdom or giving them insights, consulting. So I don't know, that a really good question. Those are just, I think about concepts and things that are really important for how we play the game at Morales Group and what I'm trying to teach my kids and my family. And so I think there's a lot of common ground there with that, but that's what comes to my mind.
That's good. That's good.
How do you stay spiritually grounded when you've got young families, you've got entrepreneurship, you've got, civil society commitments? How do you stay spiritually grounded and find the time to do all that you want to do?
Got it?
Oh, geez. To do all that you want to do, that's so tough. I mean, as I've gotten older, I'm just more and more aware of my limitations. And as I'm conscious of my insufficiency is usually where spiritual sufficiency comes in. So where I'm weak, he's strong. The posture of open-handedness, I think, has not always been an easy one. And to my earlier point around like the potentially spiritually detrimental concept of planning and reverse engineering my plans. When I'm concerned about my plans, I'm pretty unilaterally stifling the creative work of the Holy Spirit. So I think increasingly, and even in the last month or so, God has a way of reminding me of that his plans are ultimately preeminent and my plans are not. And I told these guys before we started recording that Tiffany's pregnant. And so
let's go.
Sometimes
Come on, let's go. Dad, we could drop the mic. Let's go.
Publicly now.
Congratulations.
News. Yeah. So
Congrats, man.
Anyway, things like that have a knack for letting you realize that you're insufficient and whatever plans. And just as an aside, not only is that just true, but like life is boring if it's merely just a 5-year plan that I'm doing my best to, Six Sigma execute. I wouldn't want to live life that way. And so God's heard me say that enough that he was like, oh, let's see how much you believe that.
That's good.
Here's a child.
Amen to that, brother.
That's right.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
It's big, man. That's a big announcement.
Well, you know about it.
Let's go.
Yeah, we knew about it. So, we had a baby a year and a half ago, and I'm 45, so a little bit later in the game. And it's just kind of funny. Brian has always been the guy to do things first, and I kind of trail behind. And so
you flipped the script.
I think so. We'll see.
Becoming a leader finally.
Yeah, finally getting there. But I'm super pumped because we'll have girls that I think will be close and will do the same thing. Second generation coming up. So we'll see how that goes.
So beautiful.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is. And we got a book for them, don't we, Fred?
We got a book
that's
for 'em.
right.
You
That's
know, I
right.
got an 8-year-old that just wrote a book, Exercise with Rosie. And I too just had a baby.
Available on
Yeah.
Amazon. I hear.
Available on Amazon. I got a 7-month at home, man, at 42. So,
Oh.
you know, let's go, bro.
That's
Let's go.
so
Number
good.
4.
Well, let's
Yeah.
tout some of your individual visions. Brian, I'd like to hear about your vision for the neighborhood where I met you on 46th Street, Refinery 46, and what's happening there in the neighborhood? What have
Yeah.
you seen and your heart there? And likewise, Seth,
Yeah.
what's the Morales Group all about? Bringing folks in and being hospitable and giving them employment from outside the normal Hoosier environs here. Would love to hear about that beautiful work that you've been involved with for so long. So whoever wants to go first, but I'd like to hear a bit more on that.
Yeah, so we made an investment along that 46th Street corridor about 8 years ago, bought a big 30,000 square foot building and have revitalized that and created a co-working space called Refinery 46. And we have over 100 businesses in the space now. So what I have learned in terms of community revitalization efforts is the virtue of holding loosely to my vision. So it sort of moving from a my vision to an our vision concept, which is inherently there's a little bit of sausage making to that. So I will say our vision is to keep the continuity of a really rich and diverse neighborhood while also encouraging revitalization of existing buildings that might need a refresh and some revisioning, and then land and homes that could use some care and some upkeep. And so what I try to do and sort of recognizing that I'm a stakeholder, but I don't live in the neighborhood, is be a catalyst, be a convener, but not attempt to not be heavy-handed with forcing my vision on the place. So I've really tried to take a role of, as I said, convener and recognize where we can help create tailwinds in terms of maybe it's connecting dots between institutions, finding opportunities for grants for the local CDC, helping convene the local neighborhood association. So as much as sort of a particular what that end game will look like, we've really tried to be, my vision is more around the how, creating opportunities to have those stakeholder conversations. Because I think, again, for things to be long-term sustainable, you typically need to have the stakeholders in a community really be a participant in the creation of it and have their fingerprints in both the vision casting and the execution. So if we can do anything, it's really to convene and catalyze those sort of conversations. And then what will emerge will be really reflective of the vision of the neighborhood and that we.
That's beautiful. I want to invite everyone to come down to 46th Street in Rowaldo and see what's happening.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Seth?
Yeah, I think with our business and our kind of impact and what we're trying to do, and we're an employment and staffing company, so we're putting people to work. We've employed close to the size of the city of like Fort Wayne, so we've employed a couple 100,000 people.
Wow.
And a lot of times, a lot of these businesses are very transactional with how they put people to work. It's like, hey, it's an hourly job, it's $15 an hour, and they kind of just treat them as a kind of an hourly rate. One thing that we've tried to do is kind of flip that on its head and say, hey, look, we're highly diverse and we're going to treat everyone that walks in through our doors and give them an opportunity and kind of think with this mindset of how can I build a better future for you? Even if it comes in the form of a temporary assignment short term, how do we find you in our system and how do we develop you over time? And so that's kind of how we try to play the game at Morales Group is when they come in, we plug them into the system, we get them work, but then how do we upgrade? How do we skill them up? How do we find, we call it ABC, any job, a better job, and eventually a career. So that is kind of that pathway. And so I think we've taken a different approach to how we want to recruit and staff. And we're not perfect, but I think when you employ that many people over, 20 plus years, there's been some really cool stories of people that have really kind of found a pathway in a career. And they've gone from, like $12 an hour to like an $80,000 a year salary. And it's just because of their hard work. And we're just basically opening the doors for people. And so that's been fun. It's kind of it's a platform to do good and give back. And now we're starting to build our business out. We bought a professional recruiting firm that does more of your direct hire, headhunting type work, and that's gonna open up other opportunities for people. So we're excited about how that is kind of changing over time, but it still the whole premise behind it is, how do you like serve, people and give people opportunities?
That's right. Well, you guys are exemplars, I would say, of business as mission, not business and mission, that bifurcation, but business is mission. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Seth, I didn't realize 200,000.
Me either, man. That's awesome, man.
Blows me away.
Yeah.
You guys got to go to Morales Group and find what's happening there. And I'm a customer, right, Brian, of HomeSense. So you got to go to HomeSense too. It's really
I'm not only, but I'm a client too, man. Okay, so this is real, man. Thank you guys for sharing that. I love to sit down and just have common conversations like this, because what you think you don't know. And it's very important to hear why and how successful your businesses are. But I'm gonna ask you another question. Citizen 7, I think we all are kind of familiar with, and this podcast is such a blessing to amplify what Citizen 7 means. But I'm gonna ask you guys a question. I would love you all to add perspective, because I think our community, our state, our city really needs to know the why behind this. And this question is, what are the reasons, or what was the reason that you all decided to stay in Indianapolis when you had every opportunity to leave? When there's probably people called you and, being from here, I got to get out and see the world. How did you invert the world to be in Indianapolis and not go and leave?
Well, I took a trip for a couple of years. I was down in Mexico, and I've traveled a lot. And I mean, I think what I've found is that what's distinct about Indy is the people. And so more than anything else, that's what kept me here. Relationships like that with Seth, but many others, where it's like, to be in a place where you're known, I think is something that's difficult to find. And yeah, just the open doors and the open door mentality that so many people have. So when it frankly wasn't really even a question. When it was time to move back, this was the only place that I really considered home. Other places are nice to visit. There's a lot of places with better weather. That's obvious. Certainly a lot of places with better roads.
Especially right now.
Jeez. But yeah, I mean, place is interchangeable. People are not. And so for me, that was why I set up shop here and why I'm deeply invested here.
I mean, I would add, just two things that come to my mind. One, my grandfather was a tomato migrant worker. He came up here in the 50s and he wanted to build a better future for his family. And I saw how my dad, going to Lawrence Central, like myself, going to Purdue, becoming an engineer and coming back. Just, it was all about relationships, like Brian said, and they just made Indianapolis home. And there was just kind of a legacy to come back here and really kind of carry on that. But then I also think about my career at Purdue.
Yeah.
When you do your thing and you have success on the athletic field, whether you're at IU, Notre Dame, Butler, or Purdue, a lot of people know who you are.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, capitalize on the street cred that I had. It opened doors from a
streets
athletic,
famous. I like that. Yeah.
So that was helpful. But I think it was the family. My dad's family. He was one of 6 siblings. They all lived here in the city. My parents' family were here. Nobody really kind of ventured out. And then I had kind of the Purdue alumni ties. And so those things really and then Indy being kind of, in some ways, sometimes like the underdog to maybe a Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an underdog. I love to fight for the city and want to see it grow and continue to thrive. So those are the kind of the ingredients that kept me here. It wasn't really a question for me. I was definitely I was ready to get to work and build.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So we have some questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I say that because I don't know if I'm setting you guys up, if I'm being a stooge here at the hands of Dave Neff.
Okay.
But he says to ask Seth about the Rose Bowl because no one ever has.
Oh,
What does that mean?
that's funny, man. Dave, if you're listening, a long time ago when I had hair, I was able to play in the Rose Bowl, and we didn't win that game, but it was fun to get a chance to go and play. And we played Washington, and they were a good team. We lost in the fourth quarter. I think you were out that game. That was fun. That was a fun season.
I think you lost before the fourth quarter. But...
Were you reporting on it, or?
Oh,
No,
I
he
was
wasn't
up there
reporting.
in the stands with my dad, though.
He was having fun. But,
01.
I love
January 1st, 2001.
Yeah, it was special for Purdue. Just Purdue doesn't make it that often to the Rose Bowl. And Dave, thank you for skewering me on the whole Purdue football thing. But really, really grateful for that opportunity.
Chris Huxhold says 24-14 Washington. Marcus Tuiasosopo.
Tuiasosopo.
Okay.
Yeah. We got beat. Yeah, Hux. Hux is a big Purdue alumni. So, it was a tough game, but they ran the ball really well. They were more physical than us, and they beat us. So it is what it is.
All right, second question.
Okay.
Phil Miller. Super random question here, but Seth, were you my roommate at Hoosiers Boys State in like 97 or 98?
Yeah, at Indiana State. Yeah, we were. Yeah, that's wild.
That's great.
Yeah. So
That man, does Seth still look the same as he did back then? I mean,
The
Hoosier
aforementioned
Boys State.
hair.
Hey, that was like a you took like top kids from each school around the state. You gather at Indiana State University, and during the summer, and you learn politics and leadership. And there's a lot of bright stars that came out of that. I think at one point, like Mitch Daniels was like, he ran for Hoosier Boys State, was state president, and then I don't know. Anyways, there's a lot of talented people that come out of that thing.
Now, you two are getting the most questions of anybody we've had on the show here. And Phil, I'm not going to say that Seth had less hair. That's rude.
huh?
Addison says, two St. Albans legends, boiler up.
Oh, wow.
Let's go.
Bob Schloss, excuse me, says, love seeing your friendship and hearing about your businesses and hearts for people. Thanks so much for taking the time to share. And Doug Allgood says, Seth, welcome to the neighborhood. I'm excited to work together to organize a neighborhood block party this summer.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. So we're moving down to 16th Street, right there by the Oaks Academy. And
we'll be
Polk
neighbors.
Stables. Yeah, so we're going to be moving into the Lesson-Lee or Seismic building.
Okay.
Close on that building here in 2 days.
Congratulations.
Great.
Thank
All right. So I've got a serious question. Let's get
Yeah.
back to the interview. Enough of these knuckleheads over here on Zoom. What advice would you give young entrepreneurs about finding that work-life balance, having a successful personal life and professional life?
Oh, geez. Don't expect to have balance if you want to actually have a successful enterprise right out of the gate. I mean, I just don't know. I don't know a way to do it. I mean, it forces prioritization. So I'm not saying do your enterprise at the expense of your relationship by any means, but I think know what is a balance point that can happen. So there's no path to whatever one deems success in entrepreneurship, but through it. And the concept of a J curve of growth, like there is necessarily a below the line part of the entrepreneurial experience where you don't know if you're going to make it, and like the existential dread is actually the fuel for the growth, where you can find product market fit. So I've got a lot of opinions of how that concept of where helping hurts. I think it's a little bit of help's okay, but in entrepreneurship, I think there is just a necessary part of the process that is the are we going to exist tomorrow angst. And some of that does have an impact on what I think people would deem mental health or work-life balance, but I don't know another way but through. And I think that's just part of the equation.
It's good.
Seth, anything to add
Yeah, I
on
mean,
that?
I'm not a founder like Brian. I think when you're a founder and you start from ground zero and you bootstrap, that's not easy. my dad was our founder. I started a year and a half into the business starting up. I was employee number 5. So I would just say, to answer that question, work-life balance, what comes to my mind is, if you can afford a good coach, I know you have a good coach, having a good coach helping you prioritize and hold you accountable. I think having the right partner or spouse. My wife has worked with me for the last 16 years. It helps to have a partner in the business who understands. Sometimes you got to put in a little bit more time. In those early years, watching my dad, when I lived at home and he started the business, and watching my mom, come alongside and pray for him, just kind of being there. I think those things were really, really important. But I think a coach, the right spouse, and then, you're probably going to have some lumps. You're going to take some hits because you haven't figured it out.
So Addison, to piggyback off that, maybe if you want to add anything, go ahead. But Brian, maybe you answer this. Addison says, how important have both of your wives' support and love been to your success?
Essential, practically speaking, and spiritually speaking. But yeah, with the first 2 years of HomeSense, we didn't pay anything ourselves anything, and so we lived off of Tiffany's income. So I would say she's the hero of the HomeSense story. She created all the runway. So yeah, and I don't think, I said this to a young guy last week. I'm like, there is no success in business if there's not success at home. And we know, stories upon stories of folks that have prioritized career at the expense of their family. And ultimately, like, that stuff, those chickens come home to roost, unfortunately. So I think, not to argue against my earlier comment, but like, you got to keep that wife relationship or partner relationship as primary. Otherwise, everything else will fall. That's that sort of build a house on rock.
Yeah, that's kind of biblical too, man. So it's really great.
Yeah.
All right, we've got time for a couple more, but I've got I'm going to ask Chris Huxholt's question in a different way. All right, he wanted to know your favorite story, but like, when you're 99 and you're talking to your kids, in Brian's case, or great grandkids in yours, Seth, what is going to be your favorite story about the other person?
Oh, man.
I know what Seth's going to say.
Oh, man. There's a lot. There's a lot of fun stories. There's some inappropriate stories. There's some fun stories. The one that you're probably maybe you're thinking about this, but Brian and I have always been a duo. And I remember we were playing up at Notre Dame. I was playing at Purdue. It was midway through the second quarter. I ran out of the huddle. Drew Brees gives our play call, and I'm lined up at receiver. And I look up into the stands, and in a sea of like green and blue Irish fans, I see Brian just pop up in this orange vest, and he like makes this loud like, "Caw!" And I do the same thing back to him.
So,
and in the sea of like Notre Dame fans, one guy. It was just like, we always kind of had this like telepathic, you could just tell what the other guy was thinking. It was great to see him there, always just supporting. And so I think that's carried on, into life in a lot of different ways, but that's a fun memory, because it was like, man, it was like just him and I on the field, and we're at Notre Dame Stadium in a close, tight game. And
that was cool.
It's fun to see him and have that opportunity.
That was cool. And he's told that story as the best man in my wedding, and I told that reference to his grandpa in my best man speech in his wedding. Oh, geez, the stories that I would tell, the ones that I'd want to tell, are not suitable for work. So I did at his last birthday party, though. I told some ridiculous stories. Again, that's the one I'd want to say. Oh, geez.
I know what you're thinking.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'll just sort of give the PG version. So, like, and this sets us in the 80s, because like we were in one of the station wagons where you could look backwards.
definitely.
Oh,
Chevy Impala.
classics, bro.
Yeah, before children, got killed, I'm sure, at a large rate.
Best road trips.
Oh, yeah. So, I won't get into the details. I'll just say, like, Seth and my, shared sort of desire to mess with people and so we're in like pre-K or like, we're 5-6 years old, and my mom likes to tell the story of us plotting what we're going to do to the girls at preschool all the way through the drive to school. And so, you could like change a few of the words, and we probably were having those conversations at Purdue as well.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it there. It's
Yeah,
a PG
that's good.
version.
Yeah. Young.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I don't know if you've been asked this before, but I'm going to ask you to share with each of your dads what you want to tell them because of this relationship. And then my second question is this: what do you want to share with your friend's dad about that relationship? So your dad and then your friend's dad.
Go ahead, B.
Oh, man. I mean, my dad and I, gratefully, our relationship is really fantastic. And so I'd like to think I share freely with him, but, I have just immense gratitude for the evolution of that relationship. We're adult friends, and so we talk about significant issues. And he just lost his wife, my stepmom, this summer, and so watching him, I think, go through the grieving process with just such a high degree of health and seriousness, both for the loss of his wife and then my brother a few years earlier. It's really been, it's an example of just maturity and something that I really like, aspire to emulate as I grow up, of just going through hard things, in a direct way without fear or without sort of obvious fear. So I just think he's doing the hard work in a really healthy and God honoring way. And that includes just acknowledging his own deficiencies over the years. There's nothing I can't say, however critical it might be, about childhood that he's not willing to hear and process and do so in a way that's just not reactive. Again, just it really is something that I find aspirational. Similarly, Tom and I have a great relationship as well. I was basically a Seth Morales kid. I would say through those high school years when Seth was involved in every sport, and I was just, a mere scribe on the sidelines. I had a lot more margin than he did. And so after school, my mom worked and I lived with her. And so I'd go to the Morales house after school and eat up all their Cinnamon Toast Crunch and Nutter Butters.
Crushed
Tom would bring, they took me to church on Sundays. So I've said this to both Tom and Chris, because I didn't sort of, in my more conscious years growing up, my parents got divorced when I was 9. I didn't see their relationship. I had Tom and Chris as a marital relationship to see. And it's one that I think really, just imbued in me a sense of like what true partnership that was really faith-filled looked like. And it's something that I think I try to model within my own family. So among other things, I'm just so highly grateful for that example of what a true loving marriage looks like.
Wow, thank you, Brian.
It's rich, man.
Seth.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think when I think about my dad and the relationship that we've had, it's been one that's been connected very closely through sports and then through business as we got later in life. And now it's, as he's kind of retired and become more of a chairman, it's been more about just like legacy and family. And each step along the way, there's been times where, my dad has been tough on me, but he's such a loving father. I just think that we've learned to, because my dad is such a nice guy, sometimes it's hard for him to like tell no, or he can be critical, but sometimes, I think he struggles, being very direct. And we've learned to practice a little bit more directness when we're working in the business together. And we've had some good challenges over the years. I know we're trying to plan out this generational shift and us buying into the business and him, kind of moving out of that. That was tough. And I think you helped kind of counsel me a little bit and during some of those times. But I think when you go through some of those tough times and you have difficult conversations, and sometimes it requires like generational planning and money, it's just not easy. And so I think working through that, we were able to really kind of grow even deeper in that moment. And then when you think about your dad losing Karen, my dad, my mom is losing some of her short-term memory, and that's been a really difficult thing for my dad and our family. And to see him go through that, he's opened up in different ways that I hadn't seen before. And so it's been kind of really neat to see these different evolutions of our relationship deepen in different ways. And it just continually gets better. And he gets more wise. I get a little bit more mature. We still make mistakes. We still butt heads from time to time, but like, there's just so much, like the good, all the hearts and love in the bank account outweigh, some of the debits we've taken. So it's been fun.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Well, last question for me is, we talked in great detail about, the history of you all from your fathers growing up, East Side, Lawrence Central, to life at Purdue. Seems there's been a lot of side by side. As you think about your own impact of life and legacy, what is it that you want to leave behind for your children, that can perhaps be the third generation of partnerships, of things that you hope that you all can model to leave behind for them?
When I think about what we can leave behind, I've been thinking a lot about this when we were in Mexico and we were doing the home builds with my dad and then my two sons. And I think it's just really important that we teach them to be highly relational, practice really good EQ. I feel like they don't teach that in school.
We don't. That's good. Emotional intelligence for those who don't know EQ.
Yeah. I think about just the spirit of giving and building for other people. And, I think to whom much is given, much is expected. And I think we're giving our boys and our daughter an opportunity to have a platform to really be a light and shine and give back. And I think faith is going to be at the core, but I think what I want from them is just to be good humans, give back, really push, and not just be somebody who's sedentary. And I just think about my dad and how his generosity really affects a lot of other people. I would love for them to have my dad's generosity and my mom's like spirit of faithfulness and obedience to God.
Great.
So those are the two things that, how do we pass that forward? And they carry that on.
Thank you.
That's a great question. I think there's this like duality of having more abundance and also not wanting abundance to totally like poison the well.
Wow.
So you want to give your kids everything.
Yeah.
And then there's this risk of by giving them too much, they lose the sort of edge to want to work for it. And so I think navigating sort of this reality of like 5 talents, and helping them sort of see that as not just opportunity or inheritance, but also sort of expectation. And so that's, I go back to that. And I think I just echo what Seth said. I think it's that, there's a legacy of faith. There's a legacy of commitment to community. There's a legacy of relationship continuity. And navigating again with open hands that, we want to see this from you. The best way that I've, found is just by modeling the behavior. The Schutt clan, we're a long line of contrarians. So if I want to, the first thing to do, if I want to get the opposite, from my kids is to give the sort of full-throated expectation, because they'll push back hard. Seth knows my brothers, especially my older brother who passed away, the king of contrarians. So there's a little bit of a coaxing through action and giving some room for them to grow into that. So, I'd love, for them to be deep in faith, creative in how they apply their gifts. Just motivated by similar shared visions of impacting the community that they're in.
All right. Dave Neff asks, will Brian or Seth ever consider running for office?
I'm the first check when Seth puts his name in.
No.
Bill Buckley had a great line that if nominated, I'll decline, or if elected, or I won't run, something to that effect. I may have got that transposed, but maybe, Dave. I mean, again, we all know the Neff for Mayor campaign is the first thing that's coming out of our friend group. So, no, I think to Seth's earlier point, the older I get, the more I realize the position of the edge of the inside is where I can catalyze growth more than being an insider. And I think, again, there's ways to stimulate that without necessarily having to be the insider in the office. And for the time being, that's where I want to play.
I think if we can find somebody that we can, I think there's a need for some talent around the city. I think there's some need for talent around the state. And if there was somebody that we could get behind to support, that's where I think we would probably play best.
All right, Fred. Fred's in.
Yeah.
Fred for mayor.
No, sir. No.
Okay, Fred.
No. Yeah.
All right, wrap us up. Wrap us up, Greg.
That's good.
I hope the audience can tell why I love these guys and I love their family, from sitting around the Morales dinner table, putting on 10, 20 pounds as a young man, to being with Brian's dad, who fed me the word of God and challenged me. And my life's been transformed by the Morales and Schutt families. And right here today, you've experienced this kind of friendship relationship. And truly, my deepest affection, Seth and Brian, to both of you. I will always treasure not only the past, but the present, and looking forward to the future here in Indianapolis.
So good.
Fred, how about a closing thought from you? And then maybe a final statement from each of you as well.
Man, I appreciate that. Thanks so much for letting me be a guest and warm up the seat for Don when he comes back. Closing thought is that I just think it's very important that we don't undersell the value of relationships. I think you two are a testament to what our community, quite frankly, our world needs to see. The story of your grandfather and the story of how your father and his father came together to form a bond and relationship, I think is the testimony of what Christ and his love is meant for humanity. And I believe that's what we can use to spark revival. So thank you both for being a witness and sharing your story. It impacted me greatly.
It's good. Yeah, I would just, my final comment would be, you hear guests chiming in like Huxhold or A.T. Simpson or Dave Neff. I mean, I think Indy is so special because of the relationships and some of the intentionality. Think about Don Palmer being in my dad's wedding and both of them being Sigma Chi's and then sitting in the seat and knowing, Greg, your relationship with Brian's dad and my dad, and just the Oaks Academy and some of the stuff that just the overlap, the concentric circles that are wrapped in. It's fun to just be a part of it. And I think being intentional with your relationships and doing God's work just brings you around, I think, some of the right people, and it's fun to continue this on. So I think that's the thought that comes to my mind.
Yeah, I think it's easy to lament all the things that are wrong. Something that I try to remind people of is that there is no better time to be alive than right now. There's no better place than right here. So as we try to solve problems, and there are problems to solve, I think it's important to remember that we first have a ton to be grateful for. And then as we look of what to do, I think there's no better sort of theory of change than that of relationship. The most successful enterprise in human history is the Christian church, and it was started by 12 people with the mission of one, and these were basically ill-equipped people to do anything. And so those relationships that were deeply committed and obviously inspired by Christ, but is sort of objectively the most successful venture in the history of humankind. So I think as we sort of as we identify challenges that are also opportunities in the community, I think it's organizations like C7 that build that are built on that foundation of friendship as a theory of change. And I think I think sometimes we confuse and we get caught up in tactics when just showing up and being consistent is really the catalyst for the change that we really need to see.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us here on the Citizen 7 podcast, Big Hearted Indy. And we are so grateful that you have joined us. And please, if you enjoyed this discussion, the best thing you can do is go and share this. Share this on LinkedIn, Facebook, email a friend, let them know about the podcast and the theory of change that friendships can make a huge impact on a community, a life. It's so important. And I think that's a great phrase. Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you to Fred for co-hosting. Thank you to Seth and Brian for being here, for Greg and Don and for their leadership. And thank you for you for listening here on Big Hearted Indy.